I will call to order the June 3rd meeting of the Verona Plan Commission. And we'll begin with the roll call, please.
Alderman Yurs. Here. Commissioner Linder. Here. Commissioner Ritter. Here. Mayor Hockemer.
Here.
Commissioner Horsfall. Here. Commissioner Lytle.
Here.
And Commissioner Heinzen.
Okay, we have not heard from Steve. Perhaps he's coming yet. We do have a quorum. With that, we want to welcome Alder Dale Yurs to his first meeting of the Verona Plan Commission.
Thank you.
And Dale, do you want to give a little background on yourself? I know many people in the city have known you for a long time.
Sure. I was recently elected to the Verona City Council last April for District 2. I'm very excited about that work, already really enjoying it, getting the chance to get out there and meet with the people and start working on some of the issues that I had mentioned the months prior. Background information, my family moved to Verona in 1991 when I was almost 4 years old, so Verona is my home. I grew up here, went through school here, and it's a place I love, and this has been a dream for me to serve the city since I was a kid in high school. I used to work in the Wisconsin State Senate while I was in high school, and then went on to school and now have my master's degree in U.S. constitutional history, and this is what I spent my life preparing for, so I'm very excited.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have approval of minutes from the May 6th meeting of the Plan Commission. The minutes are included with the packet. What's your pleasure?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by Mr. Linder. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Ritter. Were there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the previous meeting? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. Next, we have discussion and possible action regarding site plan review for Epic Systems Corporation to construct a 2,800 square foot storage building located at 2658 Country View Road. Mr. Sayre, if you would, please.
Thank you. Epic is proposing to construct a 2,800 square foot storage building at their property located in Country View Lane. The building right now is actually located just south of the farm campus. They're using it as a contractor building, and as that project has begun to wind down, they've taken occupancy of most of those buildings. They've identified a future use for this building on the property on Country View Road, and it's just south of the south of the solar field that's out there. They're proposing to relocate this building and use it for landscaping and storage of agricultural equipment on the property. They would basically just pick the building up and locate it on the site. The proposed setbacks for the new location will meet all the zoning requirements. There is a landscaping requirement that they have to plant 5 trees. They've shown 3 trees in the site plan. Epic has agreed to install the 2 additional trees. Parking and access to the site will go unchanged. Currently, access is from Country View Road, but mostly it comes from a gravel drive that connects into the Epic campus as you go east. So we do not anticipate any additional traffic on the property. The architecture of the building itself is red and white. It matches a typical farm building. It matches the existing building that's out there. There is a red farm old barn on the property, along with a white storage structure. So with that being said, staff recommends the Plan Commission waive the initial review and they approve the site plan for Epic Systems Corporation located at 2658 Country View Road with the following condition: that the applicant plant 2 additional fruit trees on the property.
You've heard the explanation, the background from Mr. Sayre. This is a site plan review, and it's been recommended that we waive the initial review and that we could take action this evening. This action can be done by the Plan Commission and does not have to go to the City Council. So with that, I'll open up for any questions or comments from the Plan Commission members. Are there any questions or comments? Mr. Linder.
Do we need to have a motion to waive the initial review?
It could be part of the approval process to waive the initial review.
Okay.
Mr. Linder?
Then I make a motion to waive the initial site plan review, site plan, and approve the site plan for Epic Systems Corporation to construct a 2,800 square foot storage building located at 2658 Country View Road with the condition of adding 2 trees.
We have a motion by Mr. Linder. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Horsfall. We are open for discussion on the motion. Is there any, Mr. Horsfall?
Any idea where the 2 trees are gonna go?
They have a lot of space out there, it shouldn't be an issue. I suspect they could go on the west side or the east side or the south side of the building without any issues. I mean, landscaping's never been a problem on the property, so there's plenty of room out there. It's actually, the whole site itself is 40 acres, so.
Further questions or comments from the Planning Commission members? Seeing no further questions or comments, I will call the motion, and the motion is to waive the initial review and recommend, or not recommend, and to approve the site plan with the condition that the 2 additional trees be planted. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. Mr. Yurs?
I just have to put on the record abstention.
We will let the minutes reflect that Mr. Yurs abstained in the vote. Thank you. Next, we have agenda item number 5, which is discussion and possible action on a site plan review for the Atwood Systems to construct 960 square foot storage building located at 509 Commerce Parkway. Again, this is a site plan review, and action can be taken by the Planning Commission. It is not a recommendation to the Common Council. Mr. Sarah, if you'd provide the background, please.
Thank you. Atwood Systems is proposing to construct a 960 square foot storage building located immediately south of their existing office building. The purpose of this new structure is for the company to put all their computer and electronic equipment into that building. The current structure is wood, and in general, if there was a fire or any kind of tornado or high winds, it does run a higher risk of I guess, collapsing or causing damage to that important computer equipment. So they want to construct this building and hopefully provide a more secure and safe location for all that computer software. The building itself will be set back approximately 180 feet from Commerce Parkway. With the extensive trees on the property and surrounding the property, there's a good chance the building probably won't be visible at all from the road. Here's a picture looking south from the fence that enters the property. The storage building would be constructed in the rear in this area. So odds are you probably won't even see the building from the road. Landscaping, they're proposing 18 evergreen shrubs along the foundation of the structure itself. The proposed landscaping plan does meet the zoning requirements. The architecture of the building will be constructed with a split-face concrete block. I have a materials sample here. I can pass that around if you'd like to take a look at that. The materials will be tan in color. It will match the existing building. The roof of the new storage structure will also have a slope to it to match the existing slope that is found on the office building as well. It'll also have glass block windows to provide some daylighting for some of the mechanicals that are inside the building. So with that, staff is recommending the Plan Commission waive the initial review of the proposed storage building and approve the site plan for Atwood Systems located at 509 Commerce Parkway.
Do we have any questions, comments, or any potential motions at this time? Questions, comments, potential motions? Mr. Linder?
I'll make a motion to waive the initial review and approve site plan review for Atwood Systems to construct a 960 square foot storage building located at 509 Commerce Parkway.
We have a motion by Mr. Linder. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Yurs. We are open for discussion on the motion. Again, this would be to waive the initial review and take action. Mr. Heinzen? Did you want to? No, Mr. Linder?
I just had a question on lighting. Is there, none of the plans really show any lighting and it's in the back. Like, is there sufficient lighting back there, safety-wise?
Yeah, there's no lighting requirements from a zoning standpoint. I guess the security lighting would be up to the applicant if they wanted to install it. But from a zoning code standpoint, there's no requirement for that.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Next on the agenda, we have initial review of a proposed office building in the Vincenzo Plaza Group Development located at 950 Kimball Lane. Mr. Sayre, again, if you would provide the background, please.
Thank you. The applicant's proposing to construct a 5,866 square foot office building at 950 Kimball Lane. The proposed office building would create up to 7 office spaces for smaller office tenants. The proposed building would be located immediately west of the existing Gray's Tide House. When this project was approved back in 2006, it was part of a larger group development for this parcel and also the gas station and the office building to the east. And when this was initially shown in 2006, this site to the west of the restaurant was actually planned as a bank with 3 drive-throughs. The applicant, due to demand in the smaller office market, is proposing this office building. In general, staff is supportive of that as this use is more conducive to the neighborhood area. You have a school adjacent to it, you have a daycare to the north. In general, banks with drive-throughs create a lot of traffic. This office use will not create as much traffic and will blend better with the area itself. In reviewing the bulk requirements, the proposed office building will match the setbacks of the existing restaurant. The north elevation will be the same same as the south elevation as well. Parking and access. Office users require 1 parking space per 300 square feet of office space. The proposed office building requires 20 parking spaces. With the construction of this in an existing parking lot, the loss of parking on the site is actually only 2 spaces, which was surprising. I thought it'd be a lot more, but it's actually a loss of only 2 spaces. But with the understanding that this will create some more parking demands on the site, the staff did request the applicants to create a cross-parking access easement with their parcel to the east, and they have done that, and they have actually already recorded that with the county. So officially and legally now they can park cars on the east, the parcel to the east, the gas station parking lot and the office parking lot. And the intent of that is when Gray's is busier, there's some overflow parking. So that should help alleviate any parking concerns in the area. In addition, the applicant has also talked to Once Upon a Time Child Care Center, which is located to the north. And we have a letter from the Child Care Center stating that they will allow the restaurant to park there after 6 p.m. Any day of the week. So if there are parking issues and Gray's is having a larger event, they can now legally and allow people to park to the east and also park to the north in those parking lots as well. So with that being said, the overall parking in the area does conform to the requirements with these cross-parking easements and agreements with the adjacent businesses. One of the stipulations, if this does move forward to amend the actual conditional use permit, is similar to what we did to the east, will restrict the uses in this building. The office building to the east has a condition placed on it that it does not allow indoor commercial entertainment. Those uses in general drive more traffic and greater demand. With an office use and a restaurant use next to each other, there is kind of the daytime time of day restrictions on there. Office is more busy during the day, restaurant is more busy at night. So we don't foresee any parking issues on the site with the agreements in place and with that condition that would be placed on the building. Drainage and stormwater. An existing stormwater pond is located on the north side of the restaurant. The applicant will need to submit calculations as proving that the new runoff for the new office building will fit into the pond. Architecture. From an architectural standpoint, they're proposing similar materials that have been used in the past. The green roof in the renderings is a little greener than what it actually is out there. It will be more of the subtle forest green that is found on the existing buildings and on the site. All the other materials will also be consistent with the other materials and buildings for the actual plaza. So it will seamlessly blend with the buildings on the property. It won't look like it was completed in 2013. It'll look like it was completed all at once. So with that, staff recommends the Plan Commission review the submitted materials and provide feedback to the applicants.
You've heard the explanation, the background from Mr. Sayre. If there's any comments or questions at this point, I can tell you, reading through the information and hearing the additional explanation from Mr. Sayre, my greatest concern was the parking, and based on what I saw and what I heard, I don't have any concerns regarding the parking. As far as the architecture and the quality of the building, we've seen projects from these folks in the past, and they always do an exceptional job, so I support the development. But other questions or comments? Mr. Yours?
Would it be appropriate to ask a question now, or should I wait for the motion?
We actually, this is initial review.
Okay.
We would not be taking any action this evening. It's not our intent to take any action this evening. But sure, question.
I just have a question on the parking, just to clarify. Is there a timing issue or demand on when the parking can share? Like we talked with the child care center after 6 p.m. What about the other overflow lot with the gas station? Was there a time restriction on that?
No, there's no time restriction. The applicant actually owns that parcel right now, and my big concern was making sure that since there's joint ownership between the two lots, getting that legally in place just in case for some reason one of those parcels were to sell. But no, there is no time restriction on that. Obviously with the restaurant, 5 o'clock it starts filling up. You know, there's 2 office buildings to the east. It should have the same kind of flow where that should be emptying out while that's starting to fill up for restaurant use.
So on the off chance that Gray's is really busy for a lunch event, that park sharing would be in place.
Yes.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Horsfall.
Mr. Burns, I guess I have a question to you.
Your mic, please.
Sorry. Huh? Mr. Burns, I still have a question for you. Is there anybody incidences of pedestrian problems getting across from the east parking lot to Tides? Because I've been there when it's been crowded and people park on the east parking lot and walking across there, and there's only just the sidewalk. Have we heard of anything?
I have not heard of any problems. I have been there and seen instances where there is parking on the east property currently, and people do cross there, but I have not personally heard of any problems with that.
Mr. Sayre?
I did speak with the police chief when this was proposed, and we talked about parking, and he never mentioned any concerns out there with pedestrians crossing that roadway. So I assume there haven't been any incidences.
Mr. Lytle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The layout for the parking lot, it looks like they are going to widen the driveway into that, or is that the existing curb cuts shown? Maybe.
Mr. Gunlock?
I think it's pretty close to existing.
Okay. I know that particular driveway, they've had a number of issues with settling and people nicking the curb and making ruts there. I just didn't know if it looks like there's more curbing in this layout than there is currently, or is it pretty much configured the same?
I think it may be just a hair wider.
Okay. Okay. And then, so this lines up directly across from Military Ridge. There's good alignment there.
Pretty close.
Okay. The operating hours for this development would be driven by the zoning. There's no, for this type of, the anticipated type of use, we wouldn't see any conditional use permits that would give us the ability to limit operating hours in that building. Mr. Sayre.
Mr. Sayre?
You could do that. I wouldn't recommend it because you could have an office user that somebody works late and just, you don't want to restrict that. I think the better option is to restrict that indoor commercial entertainment use.
Mr. Linder?
First of all, I think it's a pretty nice looking building. I think it'll blend in real good, real well. Question I have is there's signage by the road? I don't see any signage on the drawing at all. If there's a road, a ground monument sign or what?
I'm seeing a shaking of a head from the back of the room that there would be no signage, and it does.
We don't have any plan at this particular point.
Okay.
We will probably come.
You want to come to the podium, please, if you wouldn't mind? And if you would, just...
Yep, excuse me. My name is Casey Luther, and I designed this project. Also, I did the last project that was just approved and we just completed final work on. And at present, we don't know exactly what kind of signage we might need. If you look at the building that we just completed, above each unit, we've had vital signs, or the owners go to vital signs to pick nice signs out that match. We have a monument type sign on the building. The first building that we did was the Fratelli building there, and to follow the same theme of all the other buildings, we've got the address on it. We plan on doing like for this building. And as far as out front, any specific other signs, at present we don't have any, we're not going to put any big signs out there right now. It would probably be driven by if some of the tenants might want something. Otherwise, we would just limit it to the signs on the individual spaces. So I would imagine if we also needed, or if we had requests for a street signage, we would come back to get a sign permit and go through the process with that. But at present, we don't know what the tenants are going to be like.
Okay. Mr. Linder?
Follow up, are there any restrictions with that zoning for signs on that location?
Well, sizes are restricted along with, the where it can go, but from a design standpoint, there aren't any restrictions.
Just the size?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? while I'm up
Further
here?
questions or comments from the Plan Commission members on the initial review? Mr. Horsfall?
So what is going to be the address? Is it going to be,
I think it's going to be 950 Kimball Lane. That's what you put on there. I didn't check with the post office yet, but typically engineering
950
assigns it.
okay.
The parcel, or I took the address for Grace Tide House, so it's off the county data, so I assume that's going to be the address. But
Just
we'll take a look when they actually pull permits and get the exact address assigned.
And
Further questions or comments from the Plan Commission members? Again, I made my statements early on. I'm fully supportive of the project. I know you do really good work.
Thank
I
you.
think it'll be a great addition there, and I'm looking forward to seeing the building start.
So my,
All right, seeing no further questions, we will move on then. We have agenda item number 7, and if we take action on this agenda item, it would be a recommendation to the Common Council. And this is regarding a certified survey map to create 2 lots located at 101 and 103 Lincoln Street. Mr. Sayre, do you want to provide the background, please?
The city is requesting review of a certified survey map to create 2 new lots at 101 and 103 Lincoln Street. The proposed CSM is being requested to allow for the future construction of a new fire station on lot number 1. Presently, the lot lines for the existing fire station are pretty much the walls of the building. And actually, the fire station would be classified as a legal non-conforming structure. So the city is requesting to redivide the lots to create a separate lot for the ice arena and a separate lot for the fire station. Staff has reviewed the proposed minimum lot sizes, and it does conform to the lot sizes and the bulk requirements. And with that, staff recommends the Plan Commission recommend to the council approval of the certified survey map located at 101 and 103 Lincoln Street.
Mr. Burns, do you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would just add that the discussion of the split of the lot, it would be to accommodate construction of a new fire station, as Mr. Sayre indicated. And currently, this combined area is owned jointly by the city and town of Verona. And as part of the agreements between the city and town for the dissolution of the fire district and establishment of a city fire department with service to the town has agreed to cede their interest in what would be the new Lot 1, turning that fully to city ownership, and then the city would have the flexibility to site a new fire station on that newly created Lot 1.
Ms. Ritter, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there a timeline for the new fire station?
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, the city has formed an ad hoc committee to be involved in the planning and design process for the fire station. They've begun meetings. They've done some tours. We have some tours coming up in the next couple months. And then they'll be planning this year to make a recommendation on an architect. The city included $500,000 in its budget for 2013 for architectural and planning services. The intent would be to continue moving forward, potentially to start construction sometime in 2014.
Other questions or comments on the certified survey map? Mr. Linder?
Make a motion to approve recommend approval for a certified survey map to create 2 lots located at 101 and 103 Lincoln Street.
We have a motion by Mr. Linder. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Lytle. Further questions on the motion? Mr. Horsfall?
Bob, does the road have to have even though they're 2 separate lots, does the road to the south, does that have to have some kind of easement agreement or something like that?
Mr. Gunlock?
Well, That is a bituminous drive. It is closed off at Lincoln Street. It's really used for park personnel to get
Okay.
maintenance equipment in and out of there. There is an easement on it already, 60-foot wide easement for road purposes.
Yeah.
But it used to be an access to the Eagle's Nest, but it is now really just a maintenance road.
Okay.
Ms. Ritter?
And just for clarification, both Lot 1 and Lot 2 would be owned by the city.
Lot 1 would be owned solely by the city. Lot 2 would remain joint city and town ownership.
Mr. Yurs?
I see note number 4 on here. Where exactly would that be? And then would there be like a drive or some kind of street drawn in there to connect it more into lot number 1?
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, at this point, an emergency access has not been identified for exactly where that would be located. That'd be something as we'd go through the site planning process with an architect or design firm. So the note on the CSM just identifies that there would not be a general purpose drive or access. That would be emergency access only, but the specific location is to be determined.
Mr. Lytle?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just for curiosity's sake, can you, just in relationship to the shed and the lot line, the training facility that they're constructing right now, can anyone point out the general location?
We can. I was just wondering. Go ahead, Bill. Mr. Burns?
Yeah, it's approximately north of the shed. It's being installed on the rear of the parking lot and just to the east of the parking lot.
So that still provides maximum flexibility for locating, planning out the new station?
Yes, it'd be located on the eastern portion along the lot line. The thought when that was planned is that that would have a minimal impact on the siting of the station.
Great. Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, we do have a motion to recommend approval. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Agenda item number 8, and when we put the notice out on this, we said that we would start at 7:30. So, or upon completion of the Planning Commission, since we are completed early, we cannot start before 7:30. So we will stand informal or recess. We cannot adjourn. So what I would suggest, Kevin, is maybe if you can get set up, and then we will begin the presentation at 7:30. We'd like to walk through the presentation without any interruptions, without any questions, unless the Plan Commission has some during the presentation, for the benefit of those especially that are watching at home. And then if we can get set up now, perhaps some of those one-on-one questions can occur prior to the presentation, but then we would also be available after the presentation to take questions from the people that are not on the Plan Commission. So we will recess here until 7:30, but Kevin, if you can get set up, then we can have some of the conversation here. Okay, it is 7:30, so we will begin. We are on agenda item number 8, which is the Downtown Transportation Corridor Study presentation by MSA Professional Services, and Kevin is here. Before we get started, some of you weren't here earlier on, and we thought the Plan Commission would go a little longer, but we were done around 7 o'clock, so we recessed because we wanted to make sure that everyone heard the presentation. So what our intent is here is we're going to go through the presentation. If there's questions from the Plan Commission members during the presentation, Kevin will take those questions. Then after the end of the presentation, it'll flow better that way. And at the end of the presentation, then we will open up for questions from anyone in attendance. Before we get started, I just want to make a couple statements. One is we want to make sure that everyone understands that from the city, there have been no decisions that have already been made. I know some of you believe that decisions have been made by the city, and that is not the case. The reason that we formed the Downtown Ad Hoc Study Committee was to study the issues. They had been studied several years ago. We're taking another look at that. The city put money in the budget to perform the study, and that's part of the presentation that you're going to hear this evening. Before the city would ever move forward with any definite decisions, there would be plenty of other opportunities for the public to have comment. I heard a lot after the last meeting at the Senior Center that from the people that I heard after the meeting was that yes, there's a traffic and there's a parking problem downtown, but it's only really at certain times of the day, and are we perhaps making the problem worse than what it really is? And if that's what, if that's what the people are thinking, the residents of the city, if that's what they're thinking, we want to hear that loud and clear. But again, no decisions have been made by the city or by the Plan Commission on how we would move forward with this. We are gathering input. I do want to state this because the question came up at the meeting at the Senior Center is why weren't people notified of that meeting? For the second meeting, and we apologize for this, there was a mailing that went out, but it accidentally was sent to a different list. It was sent to a list of people that were included on a mailing for the EPIC project. So mainly it was people in the Meister subdivision and Westridge up in that area. So we apologize for that it was sent out. There was a mailing that did go out for the initial meeting, but it was within, we'd have to look, I talked to Mr. Burns and he didn't know exactly what the parameters were of that, but within several blocks of North and South Main and East and West Verona Avenue as well for the first meeting. But again, no decisions have been made. We are in the input gathering stage. You will have an opportunity to voice your opinion, and that's something that everyone on the council desires, to get that feedback from you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, if you would, and do the presentation. And if there are questions from the Planning Commission members as we go through, please raise your hands and I'll call on you at that point. Kevin.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess we'll start tonight, and for people who have been at some of the past meetings, there's a lot of similar information here. We are making some points of emphasis on issues that maybe we haven't in the past in order to clarify some of the feedback that we have heard to date. But largely, the information on the three alternatives is similar to what people have seen, hopefully emphasizing the fact that no decisions have been made on this, and we are still looking for feedback from people from all over the community and all different aspects of the community. So we'll discuss briefly tonight the project to date. I'm sure that will facilitate a lot of discussion, and then we'll take additional feedback and comments. There are comment forms. Same ones that we used at the second public meeting are out on the table out front, where the exhibits were prior to the meeting, and you're welcome to take those and leave them out on the table tonight, and I'll gather them before I go, or you can send them to the addresses that have been previously listed either at the city or at our office. As far as the project review goes, I want to touch on the study purpose and objectives, and Adam may help me out with a little bit of that related to the land use aspects. We'll talk about the existing conditions, what we did consider, comparison of the alternatives with some of the feedback that we've gathered through the two public meetings, some of the steering committee meetings, and some of the interviews that have been held, as well as the email and mailed comment feedbacks we've also gotten. And then we'll talk about some other preliminary ideas that aren't specifically related to the primary intersection of Main Street and Verona Avenue, and then we'll talk about where we're going with the study. So the primary purpose and objective of the study is make downtown a great place to live, work, and shop. We want to be able to plan for and attract future development, and to that end, we want to be able to tell people that come in with redevelopment plans, where should the development occur, what type of development should be occurring, and where do we need space from the particular properties they're interested in order to plan for future transportation infrastructure, so that buildings are being placed in proper locations for those future projects that are planned, whether they're street improvements, sidewalks, bike paths, parking lots, or things of those nature. And that's really the primary focus of the project as a whole. There's been a lot of emphasis on the transportation aspect of that. We see that as we've started the project as a potential limiting factor to what can be done or what is needed, and that's why the early emphasis has been on the transportation aspect of the study. But the primary focus is planning for this future development and where it should occur. So that's one point of emphasis we're going to hit on a lot tonight in order to drive that home. And then, of course, as part of any planning and development project, we're looking to enhance the aesthetics and the character of the downtown as well. So again, with the downtown plan, the core challenge is there are many competing elements within a small amount of space, particularly if you're talking about the public right-of-way. There's on-street parking today. There are safety aspects that we certainly want to pay particular attention to. Bicycles and pedestrians need greater attention, particularly at this intersection. There's the aspect that I think has gotten the most attention, which is the traffic operations, but again, that's a small part of this big picture of what we're looking at and trying to provide through this downtown corridor study project. On the land use planning aspect, I guess, Adam, you're going to say a few words about kind of the purpose of the land use planning and where we're going with that.
Sure. Sure. As of right now, MSA has mostly focused on transportation. Obviously, there's 3 alternatives out there. But the reason we've started off with that is that, first of all, we have to figure out what our transportation right-of-way needs are. And we need those parameters in order to have a redevelopment plan to show potential development in the future. The reality is we're going to be planning for buildings that will last 100 years in the downtown. We want these buildings to last and not be buildings that we will have to remove in the future. And part of the reason that we're doing it that way is that we've kind of put ourselves in a position right now where we have some tight spaces. We have tight spaces to expand the roadway because of land use decisions. So in the past, we've always looked at land use first, and they really haven't maybe taken as close a look on transportation as we should have. And Kevin has a slide that comes up in a few minutes that you'll kind of emphasize that point. So that's why we really want to take a look at the transportation first, because that will partially dictate what the redevelopment in the area will be. Also looking at that too is we have to look at, from a land use standpoint, what will the market support? We've heard already from people that it's difficult to attract retail downtown because we don't have enough people. So as part of the land use planning in this process is we'll be looking at, is there demand for office in the downtown? Is there demand for housing in the downtown? And how can we draw more of those people in? So if the community does want retail, we'll have to be taking those steps. Next slide. But on top of that, it also depends on what will people support? What will the community support? And also what will developers support? So as we look at the land use issues, we'll have to balance that. One of the things that we'll also focus on too is redefining or defining what the downtown is. What is the downtown? And that's one of the things we'll flush out at future visioning sessions as well. We'll also be looking at parking. Are there places that add parking? Are there places that we're underutilizing parking right now that we can improve parking? And also looking at access to properties. So the next step in the process, as Kevin will talk about more later on, is obviously tonight the Plan Commission will be talking about the alternatives, asking Kevin questions and giving him feedback. But the next step that we see is a public visioning session, looking at what does the community want the downtown to look like? What is the downtown? Trying to flush those ideas out from a land use standpoint, and how can we blend that into the transportation component as well? From that, we'll take those comments and sit down with the steering committee, sit down with MSA, try to work out what the land use will be with regards to the transportation as well, and then finally have another public meeting to kind of go over what the findings are for MSA based upon that public input and the input tonight as well.
Thanks,
Go ahead,
Kevin. Again, so, you know, the aspect that we're touching on tonight and has been the primary focus to date is improving the transportation network for all users. So that involves reducing congestion, improving safety, again, for all users, pets, bikes, and cars, and then providing parking options for the businesses that are down there, whether they're on-street or in off-street municipal lots. That, you know, that's the goal of the transportation aspect, and again, that's part of that is, as Adam indicated, looking further down the road. So there has been feedback that you know, the current situation is maybe palatable for a large percentage of the community, but again, this is a future visioning and planning for buildings, as Adam indicated, that will be there much longer than even some of the transportation improvements may last. So we want to make sure that there is space for those improvements as time goes on. And again, the primary purpose of the project as a whole is to define the future right away to guide that development and redevelopment process. It's not necessarily focused on the specific alternative, but those specific alternatives help us define what space is needed, and that's why we're looking at some of those in more specific detail. So let's talk about the existing conditions in terms of, you know, just the traffic operations, and then what we have for space, and then some of the interviews and feedback and what we've heard. This is the afternoon peak hour, evening peak hour, I guess, people coming home from work as it currently stands. We took counts last fall and run it through the industry standard traffic analysis software, and what this is showing, both in terms of the color of the arrow and the length of the arrow, is the length of the arrow represents roughly how long the backups are during that time of day, and hopefully that meshes with people's personal experiences. And then the color of the arrow represents approximate level of frustration based on, again, industry standards in terms of how long people are waiting at those locations. Certain communities have a higher tolerance for waiting, and others have a much smaller tolerance for waiting. Generally, that is relative to the community population. The larger the population, the more tolerant they are for waiting. But what this is showing, if you can see closely on the arrows, is that southbound traffic, which is, again, people commuting home from the west side of Madison, Middleton area, probably two places, both in and south of the community, is slightly over a 2-minute wait in terms of delay. And that may seem like a lot to some people, and that may seem perfectly acceptable to others, but it's just a point of reference in terms of what we're dealing with today. If we factor that out 20 years based on the Regional Metropolitan Planning Organization traffic modeling software and inputs that they put in there in terms of where jobs will happen in the county, where residential growth is anticipated to happen in the county, and we run the software again, you can see that things are roughly the same or worse depending on which approach you're on. Now we're showing on the east approach that number jumps up to over 200 seconds of average waiting. Again, these are based on the projected volumes, and the queues are all, like I said, the same or slightly longer. And again, this may be perfectly acceptable to a certain percentage of the population, and another percentage of the population may find this just unacceptable at all. As related to industry standards, this is generally unacceptable. The other aspect that Adam touched on briefly is the space we have to work with out there. Verona Avenue runs generally east-west in this picture, and Main Street runs north-south, with the intersection obviously in the center. Verona Avenue has a consistent width of 66 feet. That's generally space. That's a typical roadway right-of-way width for community streets. Generally allows space for 4 lanes of traffic and some sidewalk and terrace width. Probably not parking, maybe a bike lane if you were thinking about it. So the fact that you're getting what you're getting out of it is pretty exceptional. You're getting a lot of service out of a small amount of space on Verona Avenue. If we look at Main Street, we have slightly less space on the south leg, and even less space on the north leg. 51 feet is quite small for a street right away. 3 lanes and sidewalk and terrace, which is about what you have as you go north out of town, is about all you can squeeze out of that space. So if we're looking at any type of expansion of facilities, whether they are vehicle lanes, bike lanes, extra sidewalk width for ADA compliance or things like that, more snow storage in the terrace, any of those items, additional right-of-way is likely needed in that area specifically. The other thing we wanted to point out, kind of in the middle lower half of the screen, is a 72-foot measurement. That's probably the tightest building face to building face measurement we have in the area, and that's between the bank and the relatively new multi-business building on the east side of the Main Street. That's from building face to building face, and what we wanted to point out there is that also includes at least a 5, maybe 6 foot elevated staircase, as you see in the lower picture, that is probably serving, from what we've heard, as a emergency exit only to the bank, which gets little if any use, but is likely required per code. We certainly could work with that space, but it may require, working with the bank to deal with how they might provide us a different emergency exit in that space. But that's the tightest building face to building face measurement that we have in the area. And again, that's pretty tight for what we're trying to squeeze into this area. Some of the feedback we've heard, there's been interviews conducted with a portion of the businesses. We've also, again, had the steering committee. We've heard feedback from 2 public meetings that we've had. And you can look through this list. Again, Adam hit on a number of these items, but one of the strong aspects of the downtown is there's a large anchor that's drawing a lot of traffic, and that's good for the businesses that are there. The concerns that we heard, at least at the initial public meeting, are that people are acceptable with some of the waiting time. They'll wait a little bit longer, but what they're not happy about is how they can get in and out, or how they're unable to get in and out of a certain number of driveways along that area. The backups from the intersection are blocking driveways. They make it hard for people to get in and out. The sight distance, or the ability to see cars coming up and down the street, is a challenge, especially when there's vehicles parked on the street. So that's a bigger concern that we heard than specifically how long people have to wait. Parking is certainly a constraint for some businesses. Many are relying on some or all of their parking to be on street, which is something we need to be cognizant of and concerned with as we move forward. But generally, they are open to a wide array of land use changes and intersection changes if parking can be accommodated through that planning process. And again, as Adam hit on, need more people was a feedback we heard to get the retail to be more viable. Some of the public feedback, again, hit on many of these, but improve the safety for non-vehicle users. There's a number of school students that are coming down from the schools in the area that are traveling through this intersection. We want to be aware of that. Again, supplement the parking, create more of a downtown. So that's, again, what we'll get into as we, Adam hit on maybe a visioning process there. Locally owned business, again, with the access, and then improve school traffic and access. So that's something we'll touch on when we talk about some of the non-main and Verona intersection improvements later in the presentation. One of the things we wanted to touch on, and we have been touching on, just because some of the feedback we've heard is that this area has been studied before, and it's been studied with many or all of the alternatives you're bringing forward again during this process, is things that we looked at and determined were not viable alternatives because of either perceived confusion among drivers or just general public perception that these are not alternatives that would go over well. The first one that I would refer to is what I'd call a left turn crossover. Basically what happens in that intersection is left turns cross over the opposing traffic in advance of the intersection, so they would actually be on the left side of the opposing traffic. So if that sounds confusing to you, it is somewhat confusing, especially for the places these typically get considered. This is relatively low volume for an improvement such as that. Left turn to U-turn. That's where you tell people that you no longer can make left turns at the intersection, and you need to either make a right turn or go straight through, make a U-turn, and come back to the intersection and travel through in a different direction again. Probably not something that either people want to drive or businesses want their customers to have to drive in order to figure out how to get to their properties. An at-grade jug handle, that's sort of the middle picture, I'll call it, again, where you would have to turn either in advance of or after the intersection and travel a separate roadway to get to the location you are intending to get to. You know, similar to the other options we talked about. And beyond that, you start to talk about grade-separated intersections. So one road going over, one road going under, and certainly this is not the type of space, based on the previous slide, that's going to fit very well into or promote a downtown type of atmosphere. So those are some of the other options that are out there besides what we're going to be talking about, and just, again, wanted to get that out there to help people understand why there isn't something completely new on the table in terms of the alternatives. So again, I think people are familiar with what we are looking at, the three options: signal, roundabout, one-way pair. I believe the commission has each of these in front of them, so I'll go over them, but you can spread them out to compare as we go through. For the people in the audience, each of the alternatives is on the boards on either side of me up here. This is the traffic signal alternative, and again, with each of these alternatives, we are improving the traffic operational situation in the future. This is based on the 2035, so it's roughly 20 years from now, afternoon peak hour, PM, evening rush hour type traffic, what this would look like. So to compare to those earlier slides we had with the red arrows and the longer arrows, how much different would it be? You can see we've gotten rid of the red, we have some yellow. Most of the arrows are shorter. What we've had to do to make that happen is we have basically a 3-lane approach on each of the legs of the intersection. So there's a left turn lane on every approach, and then two through lanes, with one being shared with the right turn. And that's how we were able to achieve that level of operations. I don't know if there's questions on that. There are some colored arrows that are colored lines that are outside of the roadway improvement. That's to show the impact of different types of curb, sidewalk, and terrace width improvements that could be considered. So in the legend, it indicates how much width is being allocated for each of those potential options, and that's where the building impacts have been determined based off of both the street and those potential additional right-of-way needs. I'll touch on the building color briefly for those that aren't familiar. Properties shown in red are buildings that we anticipate, based on our preliminary analysis of this alternative, are going to be impacted to the point where they probably cannot function in their current location. So that would involve a purchase of the entire property. The blue properties are ones where we do not believe that we'll be impacting the business building itself, but there may be impacts to access, to off-street parking, to their circulation patterns within their property that we believe would probably require some compensation as part of the project. The purple properties fall somewhere in between there. Because we're working off aerial imagery and not a specific survey, we're very close with some of these different alternatives that we're proposing, and with the angle of the aerial and the shadows and things like that, it's hard to tell how close we are. So we think we're close to those. If this is an option that moves forward, we want to have some further analysis of those, but some of those properties will likely be impacted significantly. Others may be more of the blue type building where there's a access, off-street parking, landscaping, whatever it may be, type of impact. And that was done again to come up with some preliminary assessment of property impacts based on each of the different alternatives. Moving on to alternative 2, the roundabout alternative. Again, the nomenclature, legend, arrows are all defined in the same manner in terms of what they represent. We have a few more red properties on the southeast quadrant of the intersection, I'll call it, and then a few blue properties on the remaining corners. With the roundabout, we're able to tighten up back to the existing conditions much quicker. That's a function of roundabout design, because we generally need less storage for the cars entering the intersection, and because of the low speeds of the circulating roadway, traffic generally does a better job of merging back together after the intersection as opposed to a signal where everyone's waiting at a red light, it turns green, and people go and try to get in front of everyone else. So that's why we're able to cut that down a little bit tighter to the intersection.
Cheers.
Thank you. Two quick things, if you could just point out, and I know you talked about this at the last public meeting.
Sure.
But could you just talk a little bit, one, about pedestrian and bike traffic within the roundabout, and then also, one of the things I thought was a really valid point that was brought up at the last meeting was if the bypass of 151 is shut down due to weather or accident, that truck traffic coming through and how the roundabout would work along with that.
Sure.
Thank you.
And then, Mr. Heinzen, you have a question as well?
Yeah, my question was one that Dale already asked, which is how pedestrians work with the roundabout
Sure.
like this.
Sure. So I'll answer the pedestrian question first, and we'll touch on how these compare in each of those aspects when we get a little bit further along. But to specifically address how the roundabout design accommodates pedestrians, there is a wider sidewalk, you can call it a sidewalk, a path, pedestrian facility that runs around the entire perimeter of the roundabout, and it would access those red triangular, we call them splitter islands, on each of the approaches. So the way it generally works is pedestrians, stand in the apron of the crosswalk as they would at any intersection. They look to the side that vehicles would be coming in. It's only one direction because you have the central island there to pause and look in the other direction. Whether it's exiting traffic out of the roundabout or entering traffic as it comes in, you would look to that direction, wait for a gap, or make eye contact with the driver and have that understanding that they are going to stop. If you don't get that understanding with them as a pedestrian, it's in your best interest to wait for you find a driver that does. You get to the central island, and then you do the same thing in the opposite direction. So I don't know if, and then in terms of bikes, there's two options for bikers. There generally is a sort of a bike exit ramp that gets up onto that wider path area for those that are not comfortable with bicycling in the roundabout. And they can proceed as a pedestrian around the roundabout through the crosswalk areas. If they are more of your commuter type bicyclist that's very comfortable with on-road bicycling, they're instructed to take up the center of the lane and proceed as a vehicle if that's something they're comfortable with.
If I could just ask a follow-up question to
Yes.
that. In your experience with the types of traffic we're talking about at those difficult times of the day, how much opportunity would you anticipate, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon that a pedestrian would get a break in the traffic to get across the circle?
Sure, and in our experience, if the pedestrian makes their intent known that they are going to cross and they desire to cross and they've made that eye contact, then people generally will stop for them. And they will go, they go across and they get to the middle part of the intersection and then they do the same thing on the other side.
Let's let Kevin get through the presentation, and if there's questions or comments after a while, let's do that. Otherwise, it's extremely difficult, so let's allow him to do that. Thank you.
One of the things that I think gets lost when people talk about pedestrians is there's always concerns that there's always traffic there, and certainly during the busy times there's going to be traffic there. During the off-peak times there will be less traffic there and crossing will be much simpler. The other aspect is that the roundabout and particularly the entries and the circulatory roadway get designed to quite lower speeds than what you would have for somebody coming off of a traffic signal going through or whatever. So, you're talking about vehicles that are already, should be going, per the design, 20 miles an hour-ish or less as they come up to that. So it's not somebody coming in at 40 or 50 miles an hour that's all of a sudden going to have to slam on their brakes for pedestrians.
Just one more question.
Yep.
Could you point to any, roundabouts in the Dane County area that have a similar flow of traffic as Verona has downtown? That, we could use as an example of how well it works with pedestrian traffic.
Probably the closest to that's in the Dane County area, and I know they have mixed reviews, but obviously the community south and west, Mount Horeb has a number of them. Probably have a little bit more traffic than what they're dealing with out there. But the original one that was put in there, in terms of how that operates, close. City of Sun Prairie has a number of them that are seeing increased volume as developments occurring over there. That again, probably don't have quite the pedestrian volume you're dealing with here, but certainly do have pedestrians. There's a community center right next to the one. So I think those are probably, if you want to stay in Dane County, probably the two closest that I can think of off the top of my head.
Thank you.
Yep. The other question was related to the bypass traffic. That's a good question. This roundabout will be designed to be able to accommodate the larger trucks. Now, what we've done in order to minimize the footprint to the degree possible of the improvements is the design requires that those large trucks take up both lanes as they enter and travel around the roundabout. And truck drivers generally do get in the middle of the lane, take up both spaces, and travel through. We can design it so that that's not the case and people can stay in their own lane, but the roundabout gets much bigger in order to make that happen.
Mr. Years?
Just a quick follow-up to that. In that scenario and others, is there data on the number of accidents within a roundabout? I know at the last public meeting you said those accidents are generally less severe, but frequency.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know that there's specific data on that type of crash, but the truck drivers, I mean, they take up the full width just based on how the cab has to maneuver, how the trailer follows behind it. There really isn't space for somebody to get around them if they're doing it the way they're supposed to.
And then also just in general, with just general traffic as well, with the less severe crash, but just the frequency that would happen.
Yeah, typically I would say what we've seen in Wisconsin is that in the short term, there may be a few more fender benders, side swipe type crashes. But as time goes on and people get more familiar with it, the severe accidents are generally gone from the start, and those less severe, but still, all crashes you desire to eliminate or minimize. Those less severe ones generally taper down as people become more familiar with the intersection. Yep. Any other roundabout questions?
Not at this point. Go ahead, Kevin.
All right.
I'm sorry, Jack, did you? Go ahead.
There's the median section on the east side. Is there a reason why that one's so large?
Yeah, good question. Part of the reason that one is a little bit larger has to do with the angle of the intersection. Verona Avenue does not meet Main Street at a 90-degree intersection. It's a little bit of a skew, and in order to have the people entering from that direction come in at the speeds we need them to come in at in order to have the safer speeds, the lower crashes, and minimize speeds for the pedestrians that we've been talking about, we need to pull that approach down a little bit to the south to help control that speed. So that pushes the exit to the south as well, and that makes that intersection, or that island, get a little bit bigger on that approach.
Mr. Lytle?
Thank you. You stated that this configuration was the roundabout configuration that minimized the number of properties impacted. If you were found that one particular corner of the intersection was more likely to be utilized for traffic in a roundabout, are there alternate configurations that would push the roundabout more to the northeast, or based on the angle, is this pretty much the only layout that makes sense?
To answer your question a little bit more generally, maybe, the center of the circle can be placed in any number of locations, but you end up shifting the entries, all of the entries, a little bit then when you start dealing with moving it off of close to the existing center. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Go ahead, Kevin.
All right. I'll move on to the one-way pair option. This option brings southbound traffic in on Main Street and sends northbound traffic to Franklin Street via, I believe it's Railroad Street, and then back over between the former library property and the Catholic Church on the north side of the study area. Verona Avenue is also expanded out to provide for the traffic operations that are needed at the two intersections with Main and Franklin. Both of those intersections would be signalized as part of this option. Again, you can see that part of the reason the interior arrows, I'll call them, are green is because we can coordinate those signals and help minimize when people are stopped in between there. Ideally, that's almost never, but certainly at different times of the day that becomes more challenging as traffic comes in at from different directions. It was decided that to use the Franklin Street side because partly because that Railroad Street already serves as somewhat of a directional split in terms of getting traffic shifted over there and the ability to use some of that existing right-of-way versus using Schuman Street. That was discussed early on in the process, and based on the impacts of using Main and Schuman or Schuman and Franklin, this one was determined to have the fewest impacts of the one-way alternative option. We have shown reconnection of Harriet Street in this option. That could be done really in any of the alternatives, but we felt it was more pertinent here because of the need to provide access between the one-way pairs. Additional street connections between the one-way pairs could be provided between Harriet and Main if that was desired. We're showing closure of, I believe it's Richard Street in this option because of how the two one-way pairs come back together at the location. There's in terms of at the Main and Verona or Main Verona Franklin intersection area, impacts are generally similar to the other options. They extend a little bit further east due to the fact that we are adding a traffic signal at the Franklin Street intersection, and then obviously on the north and south ends where the tie-in points occur, there would be some right-of-way impacts to those areas as well.
Mr. Ayers?
Thank you. I have a quick question regarding, I'm not an engineer, so I don't understand, with the construction of the current roads that we'd be using, would those roads be able to withstand the traffic of the larger trucks and vehicles, or would that then make the city have to come back and say, all right, now we need to redo these roads to be able to withstand the strengths of the vehicles?
Sure. And that was a comment that was brought up too at the public meeting. It was a good comment. The improvements that are needed on Franklin Street to make the signalized intersection work at Main Street generally extend to, I believe it's Park Avenue, to the south, and a little bit to the north of Verona Avenue there. Railroad Street would certainly need to be reconstructed, both probably in width a little bit and in terms of pavement structure to handle that additional traffic. And then the shift over area on the north, again, is a new facility, so that would be new pavement. It only leaves a short section on Franklin Street that would even be potential for that, and we would likely end up just repaving that as well. Maybe the curb could stay where it is, but the pavement would be replaced almost in full to match the other new sections.
Go ahead, Kevin.
All right. Yeah, as I hinted on, again, additional right-of-way impacts to the north and south, and other connections that are shown there. Again, some of them can be provided through the other alternatives, and we'll touch on that later. One of the things that I didn't hit on as much maybe as I should have with each of these, and I can flip back quickly to the signal and talk a little bit more about the bike facilities. With this traffic signal option, we are not providing space on Main Street for on-street bike accommodations. The idea there, in order to, again, minimize the impacts to the adjacent properties, is that the bikes would be directed to either Schuman or Franklin as a alternative to get them in the north-south direction. Certainly there's going to be commuter bikers that are going to be comfortable staying on that facility, and they're more than welcome to do that, but for the less comfortable or recreational type bikers, a designated space is not going to be provided. Sidewalk is included, but a designated on-road space is not provided in this option. Could be added, but again, it takes more space. The roundabout, as we kind of touched on with the question, there would be bike lanes coming up to the intersection, and then as you approach the roundabout, you have the option of either getting off onto the path or continuing through, more like a vehicle. And then with the one-way pair, I believe the intent here is that the bicycles would be provided a space in the same direction as the main vehicle flow on the street. So you'd have one-way bike flow on the one-way pair as well. So we've been doing a little bit of maybe in our head comparison as we've been going through, and you have each of the options to look at as we discuss. But there's a number of aspects that we wanted to talk about, and just kind of do a side by side to give some comparisons of the different alternatives as you see on this list. Operations, which are again the arrow colors and lengths. The signal gets us slightly better than what we're dealing with today when we look out into the future. Roundabout would have the shortest backups. The one-way pair has the least delay. Again, the backups are how far back from the intersection the lineup of cars is. The delay is how long you're waiting. One concern that has come up with the roundabout is when we run out of capacity with that roundabout design, what are our alternatives to proceeding with a different solution? And you're either looking at an expanded roundabout beyond what's there, which there aren't a lot of them. There are some, obviously, and the ones I believe on M to the north either are or will have the option of being bigger, 3-lane type entry roundabouts in the future, or you end up reconstructing to something else in the future. The one-way pair has some potential for additional capacity beyond what we're looking at because we've split the traffic onto 2 streets. From a safety standpoint, the signal, we would generally see no significant change from the existing conditions. There is some concern regarding sight lines for the permissive left turn, and I'll explain that. That's fairly technical. If you look at your exhibit, the north and south roads have a dashed line that's sort of offset as it travels through the intersection. So if you're a left-turning vehicle traveling north and you want to go left onto Verona Avenue, if there is someone traveling south waiting to turn left, they will obscure your view of other southbound traffic based on how we've laid this out. And that, again, is an attempt to minimize right-of-way impacts. We can look at straightening that out and improving that, but again, it's a balance between impacts and the operations of the alternative. The other option is that you can only turn left when you had the green arrow. That also degrades operations because you limit the amount of time people can turn left. But that was something specific to the signal that we wanted to bring up that's different than what is out there today. Roundabouts, as we touched on, historically have a good safety record in terms of the severity of the crashes and the perception of the ped crossing, particularly at the exit sides of the crossing, is that people are accelerating to leave the roundabout. Are they going to see me? Am I going to get my gap? And that is certainly a valid perception, but it has not borne out in any crash data that's been collected to date in Wisconsin or internationally. The one-way pair option, because vehicles are only traveling in one direction on the north and south streets, there is less conflict. So for example, there isn't the issue of the northbound lefts and the southbound lefts trying to see past each other. So generally that's considered safer. There's less vehicles moving around within the intersection space. Parking, which we know is a very important issue, and this strictly compares the on-street parking. Based on the layouts we have, each of these has a loss in parking, and as you can see from the numbers that are shown here, the roundabout generally takes away the fewest parking spots, although I think, as kind of been insinuated, not all on-street parking is created equal. Some businesses are heavily reliant on the on-street parking. Other businesses have, I don't know if plentiful off-street parking, but certainly some off-street parking to handle their customers. This is based off of the exhibits we have, and you can see from the text there where we're looking at some of the bigger impacts, south and west for the signal, south for the roundabout, and with the one-way pair, it's more east of the Main Street intersection because of the signal at Franklin. There is the potential with the one-way pair, and this again goes to the idea of what is the land use planning aspect of this, to add marked on-street parking to Franklin Street within the existing right-of-way. If that stays residential, maybe that's not desired, but if there is plans for that as we proceed with the land use planning aspect of that to convert to multifamily, commercial, mixed use, whatever it may be, then there could be some on-street parking added in that area as well. Access with the signal, again, driveways near the intersection are still going to be blocked by those queues. Because we've removed the on-street parking due to the needs of the traveling public, sort of that idea of make good with what you've been given, the sight lines coming out of the access points would probably improve because the parked cars are no longer there. So it's certainly not something we were shooting for in terms of eliminating parking, but there is a benefit to eliminating some on-street parking. With the roundabout, the queues are shorter, so the driveways, fewer driveways are blocked. Some are blocked by the splitter islands, which means they would be restricted to in and out, right in and right out type access. But most of the ones that are impacted, and I would have to check to see if I could say all, but if you wanted to leave the exit and go left, you would be able to proceed into the roundabout, make a U-turn, and go in the direction you originally intended anyways. And that's sort of a benefit that as traffic gets busier, becomes more desirable and more prominent. Generally, people want to be able to go the way they want to go out of the access at the time they leave the access, but if you've got to go 100 feet, make a U-turn, and you can do that in 20 seconds versus waiting a minute to make that left turn, and those are just ballpark numbers. It would be